Hello and welcome to DaTechGuy's Midnight Court. This is DaTechGuy broadcasting from my room. This is the Palacial DaTechGuy's broadcast studio, otherwise known as my room, for the pilot episode, the test episode of DaTechGuy's Midnight Court, now broadcasting. We're going to pause the broadcast for a second to tweet this out. There was a link. I don't see where the link went. I'd like to try and send out the link, but it does not seem to be going out at the moment. Let's see if I can get that to, that's what I'm looking for. There we are. Copy that. And again, welcome to the premiere of DaTechGuy's Midnight Court, a video podcast to replace the old audio podcast that we used to do a year and a half ago. It's been a very long time since I've done any kind of podcasting of any type. This is the first video live podcast that I've done, and I decided to do a video live podcast because it's easier to do a podcast of something that's in your mind, fresh in your mind, than to try and think, I'd like to talk about that. Maybe I'll find some time to do it. I remembered the time, since this is the week of CPAC, and way back when I would be at CPAC, mostly over the last 10 years. In fact, it was 10 years ago was my first trip to CPAC. I would be at CPAC doing what was called DaTechGuy's Midnight Court, where I would literally at midnight go down to the lobby and just grab various conservative talkers and so forth and interview them. And it would basically, I'd hold court from midnight till about 4 a.m. until I could no longer do it, or until the people at the hotel said, we don't want you hanging around being loud in the lobby area, which happened more than once. But basically, I work till midnight these days. I get home around 20 past 12, and I decided I had some things I wanted to talk about. So thus, DaTechGuy's Midnight Court returns. No guests, no other thing, just DaTechGuy from the house. No palatial studio. I don't have the money for a palatial studio. If someone wants to go to the tip jar and donate $50,000, I'll build a palatial studio in the house. But until that day comes, we will be broadcasting right from here. After all, I'm an old blogger who's been blogging for 13 years. They say we blog in our pajamas. Well, I'm not in my pajamas because I just got home from work, but I am in my bed, sitting down in the bed. So let's talk a little bit about election 2020, which is the reason why I decided I wanted to do this podcast today, because election 2020 is getting so interesting. And what I really want to talk about is the Democrats and Bernie. And it's really fun to watch what's going on with the Democrats and Bernie. I mean, Bernie Sanders is having a grand old time, making good money off of this too, because of the way ad buys work. If you have a company, you commission a company to do your ad buys when donations come in, and if a friend of yours or a family member is in charge of the company, they get a cut of all of those campaign donations. So that works out very well for Bernie and a lot of other guys who do ads and such. It's an easy way to make money, which is why so many people are so anxious to go off and run for office, because you can finagle ways to pay yourself out of all of those campaign donations that come in, assuming that you can talk people into giving you their money. But the idea that the Democrats are now panicking over a socialist being at the head of their ticket is an awful lot of fun. And it's a lot of fun for several reasons. First of all, the problem could have been solved right off the top by saying, Bernie, you're not a Democrat. You're a socialist. You've been running as a socialist. You never claimed to be anything other than a socialist before. You only decided to be a Democrat so you could run in this primary, which in fairness is the same thing that Michael Bloomberg did to run for mayor of New York, because there weren't a whole hell of a lot of Republicans running from the mayor of New York. It was a real easy way to qualify on the ballot, because you didn't have to fight a bunch of other Democrats in the primary, which is what Bloomberg did in New York. So Bernie Sanders decides, I'm going to run as a Democrat. And the Democrats decide, we are not going to oppose him. Now the question becomes, well, why didn't we oppose him? Well, the Democrats really are getting what they've been paying for the last 30 or 40 years. And I have a piece that's going up later today. I'm going to actually publish it once this podcast is done. It's not going to be a long podcast. We're only going to do about 15 or 20 minutes, because this is the test podcast. This is the podcast to see if people are interested. Now we're going to do the podcast live for now. We're going to save it as a video. And then after we save it as a video, we'll send it out to the subscribers and see if they like it. And if the subscribers like it, then we'll do more. Depends on what the response is. Don't know how big the response is going to be. Don't know how many people have an interest, or if anyone has an interest. But if anyone has an interest, we are going to try and share that interest. Let me make sure I can tweet that out. Now I'm getting older, so I'm gonna have to put on the glasses to see what's going on here, because I am not as young as I used to be. Then again, who is? But there's nothing wrong with getting old. Getting old just means you're not dead, which is what I remind people constantly, that there's nothing. That's what getting old is. So, anyways, so let me explain where the Democrats are here. Now, I was a Democrat, and my parents were Democrats before us for a very long time. And I left the party around 1992, when I figured out that, as a believing Roman Catholic, I got no place to go here. No place at all to go. There's no reason to be, you can't really be a believing Democrat and be a believing Roman Catholic. They just don't fit together, especially based on abortion. And this was before all the gay marriage kerfuffle and everything else was coming up. This was very, very obvious to me that there was no place for me in the Democrat Party anymore. And the Democrats, over the last, I'd say 40 years, maybe a little less. It got worse in the Reagan years. But you started in the 70s to see the Democrats move away from law and order. You saw the Democrats start to move away from the various beliefs that were standard beliefs for Americans. They moved away from the belief in God. They moved away from the belief in America as a good and a great place. They moved away from these things. And once they moved away from them, they decided that, hey, we're going to go in this other direction. Now, I actually think a lot of this movement came from foreign funding, because basically, how do I put this? The Soviets and the Chinese know that they could not compete with us in terms of missiles, in terms of, they try to compete with us militarily in terms of spending and the like. But you can buy a university professor or a university for a whole lot less than a missile system. And more importantly, a university person stays bought. And every person that they teach and indoctrinate, you get for free. Which is why that's a very good investment. So, anyways, the Democrats have had a long time to decide, you know what? This is what I want to do. This is a bad idea. This is a very bad idea to go off and do these things. This is a bad idea to teach our children, teach our families, teach our culture. It's a bad idea to promote an un-American culture. It's a very bad idea to promote our enemies. And if you were alive during the 80s, I was. Uh, we had Democrats over and over again pushing the agendas of our enemies or attacking us and attacking basically Reagan. Now, again, I was my parents. My father fought in World War II, and at that time, Democrats, it was not uncommon for Democrats to be pro-military. Very common. A lot of World War II veterans were Democrats, and unfortunately, what you end up with is you had a lot of people. It's one of the reasons why Reagan did so well among Democrats is because Reagan was pro-American military, and there were a lot of Americans who were pro-military. But the Democrat Party moved away from this, and the Democrat Party saw this moving away. And they really had a choice. The Democrat Party could have decided, you know what? I think this direction is a bad idea. I think we should do something to stem this. Now, this might have been unpopular for a little while, and it could have given them a hit. But because the party is so wedded to coalitions and they were afraid of rocking the boat. They were afraid of a grand realignment. And they just were not willing to, they figured, oh, we can control these guys. So there's a little bit socialist. The more farther to the left they are, the more likely they're going to vote for us, and the less likely they're going to vote for the Republicans. And this is the wave of the future. This is the direction history is going. Let me tell you a secret. Nobody knows the direction history is actually going. That's called fortune telling. Doesn't work. Fortune, don't fall for this stuff. If anyone tells you this is the wave of history, you know that they're full of shit. Nobody knows where history is going. History is not written. And conventional wisdom is always right up until the moment it's not. Conventional wisdom, ignore it. Direction of history, ignore it. This is the way of the future. Nobody knows what the future is going to say. It does not work that way. It has never worked that way. It is a foolish way to think. So the Democrats decide we can control these guys. And we really don't want them to go third party. Because if Bernie became a third party, those young people aren't going to vote for Democrats. And suddenly the Democrats become a permanent minority, or at least a party that has to ally with a socialist party to try and that gives the Republicans a plurality. Because we've become two cultures here in America. We've become the traditional American culture that has always been here, the traditional Judeo-Christian American culture. And you don't have to actually be Jewish or Christian of any type to go for Judeo-Christian culture. It's the American culture that we've had. And you now have the new secular culture. Well, the Democrats now have themselves stuck with Bernie over here. And Bernie Sanders is pushing his agenda. And it's an agenda that says, I'm going to give everything away. It's a gimme agenda. And people like a gimme agenda. And there are a lot of people who are falling for this. And one of the reasons why people are falling for it so easily is because we have created a culture that is so comfortable that people don't know. People think that the things that come from America are inherent in it, but they're not inherent in it. They come from the capitalism, the freedom of speech, the freedoms that we were granted and that were part of traditional American culture are the things that allow all of the good stuff that we're getting from here in American culture. So these kids don't understand that. Furthermore, they've never really suffered. I mean, think about how many kids are out there talking about how they're oppressed while they're going to a college that costs 5 or 6 figures and are paying basically more than the median income of most countries in the world being in that college. And they consider themselves oppressed. It's ridiculous. And logically, a person would not think this. A person with some logic and would think about that. But now a kid doesn't think this because a kid only knows what they are. Because I remember when I was a kid and I was stupid. I didn't realize I was stupid. I thought I was smart. And again, this is normal. Kids think they're a lot smarter than they are, and a lot of them are very bright. I mean, I was a very bright person when I was in college, but I wasn't experienced. And years and experience gives you something. And this is something that in traditional American culture, you look to your parents, you look up to your grandparents because you realize they managed to do things without many of the advantages you have. I mean, when my mother was born in 1924. My grandparents were born, there was no such thing as a radio. My grandparents were born in the 19th century. My mother was the youngest in her family. I'm the youngest in mine. So there's a lot of spread there. My grandparents were born in the 19th century. So, I mean, a radio did not exist. People were not flying when my grandparents were alive. Grandparents were like, my oldest grandparent was like 17 or 18 when the first man flew, to give you an idea of what that means. But because kids, we live in a society. I mean, look at right now. Right now, I am live streaming on YouTube, which means that although not a whole lot of people are watching right now, the entire population of the world that has access to the net has the ability of seeing what I'm saying. Now, granted, like I said, not many people are watching right now. This was completely unannounced, and it's 1 in the morning Eastern time on a Sunday. Well, Monday morning now, so there's not a lot of people watching. But the things we can do now, nobody imagined them years ago. So they don't have experience. They don't know what socialism is. They only know what they've been told. Now, some people will research it. Some people will look at history and see that socialism, how do I say it? Socialism will always work the next time. Socialism never seems to work now, but it's always going to work the next time. That's what socialists will constantly tell you. But you get basket cases and you get murderous stuff. And let's put it this way: Bernie Sanders is calling him a socialist is being kind to him. He's a communist. Remember, Bernie Sanders honeymooned in the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Not after the Soviet Union fell, but during the Cold War. That is like honeymooning in Berlin in 1938. Because the only difference between a communist and a Nazi is the communists lasted longer and had better PR. It's the same thing. Never forget that 2 weeks after Germany, in fact, not even 2 weeks after Germany invaded Poland, the Russians invaded from the other side, which is interesting because, Germany and England and France, which guaranteed Poland's security, declared war on Germany when they invaded, but they didn't declare war on Russia when they invaded. And that hit me earlier today, and I'm going to have to look up why they didn't think that Russia's invasion of Poland was worth a declaration of war. Because I was wondering about that today, but I'm getting off topic. The point is, Bernie's a communist, an actual communist. And frankly, one of the reasons why we're seeing so many people in the Democrat field who are talking about Bernie type stuff and pandering to these stuff is because they want that vote. They want the vote of those kids. And so they're pandering over there. Now, granted, they may not, in fact, be full-fledged honeymoon in the Soviet Union during the Cold War communists, but they figure they want those votes. Well, now the Democrats are in this position where they built this monster. They built this cultural monster and allowed this cultural monster to be built over the course of several decades. They allowed traditional American values to be thrown away. And what's the result? The result is now they've got Bernie, and now they've got Bernie leaning. And they never went after Bernie in the same way because they did not want to alienate the Bernie voter. At least they didn't go after him publicly. I mean, granted, they screwed Bernie the last time around to get Hillary. In the same way, and I should say in a similar way that Obama played around and kept Hillary from winning. People forget that there was some interesting shenanigans in 2008 by the Obama team that kept Hillary from getting the nomination. I wrote about it years ago when it happened, but it never got any traction from the media. Unexpectedly, of course, which did not want to. The media wasn't all that into watching, accusing the first black president of playing election games. But again, the media decided to give these people passes, and they gave them passes because they were afraid of hurting their agenda. They were afraid that if they did not give them a pass, they could chase away votes that they would need. And when you prime people in this way, when you let stuff like this happen, you can't control it. And now the Democrat establishment finds itself in a situation where they're going to have to make a choice. Unless Bloomberg can suddenly come up, unless Biden can suddenly come up, they're going to be in a situation where they have to say, do I want a socialist? Do I want to run a socialist for president? Do I vote for a socialist or not? And we're going to tweet out the live stream again. Give me 1 second. Let's tweet that out. Sorry about the delay. I've only got so many hands here. And like I said, this is the pilot episode, so we're playing this totally by ear. I literally had the thought to do this tonight while I was at work because I was thinking, how do I want to do this? How do I want to handle this? I said, I'm just going to do it. And we're going to see what happens, see how it comes out. But, they had the chance. They could have stopped it. They were too afraid. They saw too many advantages of weeding people away from traditional American values because they thought they could, if they did that, they thought that secularism was the future of the country. They thought that irreligion was the future of the country. And the problem is that religion tends to grow. I mean, and a great example of this is Orthodox Jews in New York. Orthodox Jews in New York are suddenly a much larger community than they were 20, 30 years ago versus secular Jews in New York. And the reason for this is Orthodox Jews have children. And their children have children. And when you decide to be fruitful and multiply, in 20 years you have voters. This is something we talked about on the blog with Robert Stacey McCain, for example. Stacey McCain has 6 kids. 3 of those kids are married and they have kids. So as loud as an Amanda Marcotte may be, Stacey McCain and his children 20 years later have plenty more votes. You got to get the votes from somewhere. And if you're aborting your kids, you're not getting votes. But again, I'm digressing a bit. The Democrats decided to go with this communist. They decided to encourage him. They decided not to discourage him because they were afraid of losing votes. Now they're in a pickle. What are their choices? Choice number 1. Or choice number 3. Bernie takes over the party they can pull out. They can try and rebuild a Democrat traditional values party. In other words, yes, we're going to allow religion. Yes, we're going to do this, but we're going to have these liberal economic principles. Now, there are people who like liberal economic principles. There are people who think that government intervention is a good idea. I'm not one of them. But there are people who think it's a good idea. And you could probably get some of the more liberal Republicans. You could probably get a Charlie Baker. You might get a Mitt Romney. You might get a fair amount of people decide, I would not mind working with a party like that. Problem is, now you're giving the Republicans a plurality. They don't want to do that. The second idea is the one that Chris Matthews is suggesting, that they let themselves take the hit and lose this election and then try and get a normal candidate otherwise. In other words, let Bernie McGovern himself. And for those of you who are too young to remember, McGovern was the far left Democrat who ran in 72 and got plastered. There are some advantages to that idea in the sense that you have time to rebuild. But the problem with that is, first you give Trump the election, and frankly, I don't think they have a whole lot of choice in the matter. I think Trump gets this election. Trump wins this anyways. I don't think any of the Democrat field has a prayer against Donald Trump, and that'll be the subject for another later podcast. Or the third choice is to embrace Bernie and go full socialist. I think that's really dangerous. I think that's really foolish. And I think that's what the Democrats are going to do. Now, the Democrats are going to try and say, oh, Bernie's not a real socialist. He's a Democrat socialist. Or he's an American socialist. Add a national tag to it. Well, maybe we can call it national socialism. But this is what could be happening. This is what we might see. I think they're going to choose that first choice because the Democrats are not willing. Democrats are all about power now. And I don't think they're willing to take the Ted Kennedy approach. Now, one thing about Ted Kennedy, a very bad senator and caused a lot of harm. But one of the things that Kennedy did and understood is incrementalism. Kennedy did not have a problem with an agenda where he got a little bit of what he wanted, and then a little more to get what they wanted. Didn't have a problem with that. Right now, I don't think the Democrats see it. And they had been working along those lines, but I don't think they're willing to. I think they've reached a point where it's too late to divorce themselves from the monster they've created. And so, given the choice of not having power or going with Bernie, they're going to go with Bernie. Now, I also think, and this is going to sound like a bit of a contradiction, if Bernie wins legitimately, he deserves the nomination. If he now by winning, I mean winning according to the rules. If he goes into the convention with enough delegates for the nomination, Democrats should nominate him and take their hits. If he wins, he wins. People have the right to be wrong. Democrats have the right to be wrong. Democrats have the right to make a bad choice. They've done it so often lately, one more time won't kill them. But if they can stop Bernie in a legitimate fashion, no reason why they can't. I mean, they can certainly go ahead and do so if they want to stop him. Once they get to the convention, because I've been predicting a second ballot win. Way back, I predicted a second ballot win for Joe Biden. In fact, I suggested the reason why the field was so large was to make sure it got to a second ballot so that the Democratic establishment could pick the candidate. And now that's going to become a necessity if they want to stop Bernie Sanders. So what's going on here is, if Sanders gets it, they should let him get it. They should take their lumps. Some of people, I don't think you're going to see a Never Bernie movement because they have so vilified Trump that I don't think they can credibly decide to go in that direction. But again, it doesn't really matter anyways because Trump is going to win this election. And the next time we talk, I'm going to explain why. Not going to do it tonight. I got to get some sleep. It's, let's see, 1:14 a.m. Eastern time. I've got adoration at the chapel in 8 hours and 45 minutes. I've got some rehab work for my shoulder around 2:15. Then I have a full shift going on. So I want to remind you people who are going to be watching this, there's not a lot of people watching the stream, but I want to remind you that we're going to do this occasionally, maybe once every 2 weeks. See how with the response is. I'm going to email out the stream to the subscribers, see what they think. If you like it, if there's a response from the site, if I see people deciding, hey, this is a good idea, or hitting the tip jar or whatever, we'll do this more regularly. If not, then we'll do this as it comes to mind. But remember this, and this is what I want to leave you with concerning the Democrats and Bernie Sanders. This has been a long time coming. The Democrats didn't come to socialism in 1 year or 4 years. Through the education system, through the various ends, nonprofits and so forth, they've pushed themselves in this direction. They could have checked it. They didn't. They decided that they did not want to risk their coalitions by trying to make anybody upset, which is basically what's happened with transgenderism and all these stuff. People are afraid to say basic facts because they don't want to risk somebody upset and making a fuss. Well, this is what it's got the Democrats. And they're going to get exactly what they deserve. Now, hopefully, if Sanders is nominated, now again, I've already said that Trump is going to win this election. There's always a chance I'm wrong. Hopefully, America will not deserve a socialist communist president. But if we elect a socialist communist president, remember, we're a republic. We will have gotten what we deserve. Hopefully, we deserve better. But we will find out. But anyways, the Democrats are in this situation now. It's not over yet, of course. I mean, you have South Carolina, Biden's still leading there, and Bloomberg still has a ton of money that he's spending. So he could always, I mean, he can last to the convention because he has the money to buy. He has the money to buy the votes that he needs to buy. As long as Bernie doesn't get enough delegates to win outright, Bloomberg has the money to buy his way to the election. The question is, will the Democrats let him do it? And it'll be a lot of fun to find out. As Vodka Pundit has been saying, invest in popcorn futures because it's going to be a lot of fun watching it. So the next time we talk, I'm going to explain why Donald Trump is going to win next time. And the reason why it's going to, and here's a little teaser. The reason why Donald Trump is going to win is because of the kamikaze Scotsman strategy. And that's a very obscure cultural reference that a lot of you will not get. But it's the kamikaze Scotsman strategy, also the sour grapes, which is another way of putting it. And I will explain that when we talk again. It'll probably be at least a week, maybe sooner, depending on how this goes over. Well, for any of you who decided to watch the live stream, and there were a few people popping in and out, thank you very much for watching. For those of you who decide to watch us later as a podcast, hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, give the video an up arrow. Go to send a tweet at on Twitter at the Tech Guy blog, and remember that you can catch me every Saturday on terrestrial radio on WQPH 89.3 FM, Shirley Fitchburg, Catholic station. My radio show is called Your Prayer Intentions, where we pray for people's prayer intentions and talk a little scripture. This week's show is going to be recorded on Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, and will be broadcast on Saturday, which is broadcast Saturday at noon. If you have a prayer intention that you want us to pray for on the show, you can email the station at WQPH893 at Comcast.net. That's WQPH893 at Comcast.net. Send your prayer requests if you want us to pray for them. Include as much or as little detail as you want. If you just want a private intention, just email the word private and we'll make a prayer for that private intention. But until that radio broadcast on Saturday and until the next time, this is Pete, the Tech Guy, saying thanks for joining us. And I declare tonight's Midnight Court adjourned.